Introduction. The kitchen was quiet. It was the kind of heavy, thick silence that only happens after a storm has passed. On the floor, a single plastic block, a bright blue Lego, lay near the fridge. Next to it was a puddle of apple juice, slowly creeping toward the baseboards. Sarah sat on the floor, her back against the dishwasher. Her face was hot. Her heart was still thumping against her ribs like a trapped bird. Just 3 minutes ago, she had been a person she didn't recognize. She had been a person who screamed so loud her throat felt raw. She had seen the look in 7-year-old Maya's eyes, not a look of "I'm sorry," but a look of pure cold fear. Maya had run to her room. 4-year-old Leo had crawled under the dining room table, clutching his stuffed dog. Sarah put her head in her hands and cried. She didn't cry because she was angry anymore. She cried because of the shame. This was the 3rd time this week. She had promised herself every morning that today would be different. She had told herself she would be a calm mom. But then 5:30 p.m. hit. The witching hour. The emails from her design clients kept chirping on her phone. The kids were hungry, the house was a mess, and that one little Lego was the final straw. In that moment, Sarah felt like a total failure. She felt like she was breaking the very children she loved more than anything in the world. She felt like a reactive firefighter, jumping from one emotional fire to the next, never actually putting them out, just getting burned over and over again. But now, imagine a different scene. 1 year later, Sarah is in the same kitchen. It is 5:30 p.m. again. The witching hour is in full swing. Leo has dropped a bowl of cereal, and Maya is complaining that her homework is too hard. Sarah's phone is buzzing with a rush request from a client. Sarah feels the heat start to rise in her neck. She feels her jaw tighten. But this time, something is different. She doesn't explode. She doesn't even raise her voice. She takes a breath, a very specific kind of breath. She looks at the spilled cereal, and then looks at her son. She sees a little boy who is tired, not a villain trying to ruin her day. She moves through the kitchen like a steady anchor. She sets the tone for the room instead of letting the room's chaos set the tone for her. 10 minutes later, the cereal is cleaned up. Maya is sitting next to her working on a math problem, and the house feels peaceful. Not perfect, but peaceful. This book is the bridge between that first Tuesday of screaming and that second Tuesday of peace. The breaking point. If you are holding this book, you probably know exactly how Sarah felt on that kitchen floor. You know the breaking point. It's that moment where you lose access to the part of your brain that knows better. You know you shouldn't yell. You know it doesn't work. You know it makes everyone feel terrible. But in the heat of the moment, it feels like a volcano is erupting inside you, and there is nothing you can do to stop it. You might feel like you are the only one. You see other parents at the park or on social media who seem to have it all together. They use soft voices and gentle touches. You wonder what is wrong with you. You wonder why your buttons are so easy to push. The truth is, you aren't a bad parent. You are an overwhelmed parent. We live in a world that asks us to work like we don't have children and parent like we don't have work. We are tired, we are stressed, and many of us are carrying around a heavy, invisible backpack filled with the way we were raised. When our children act out, it doesn't just annoy us, it triggers something deep inside us. It's a physical reaction, not just a mental one. This book is for the parent who is tired of the yell and guilt cycle. It is for the mom or dad who wakes up with a heavy heart, wondering if they've already done permanent damage to their child's spirit. It is for the person who wants to be the steady anchor for their family, but feels more like a leaf in a windstorm. The promise of the steady anchor. By the time you finish these chapters, you will have a completely new way of looking at your anger. You will learn that your rage isn't a sign that you are a monster. It is a signal that your system is overloaded. We are going to move you from being a reactive firefighter to being a steady anchor. A firefighter is always waiting for the next disaster. They are on high alert. They react to the flames. It is an exhausting way to live. But an anchor stays still, even when the waves are crashing around it. An anchor provides safety for the ships nearby. When you become the steady anchor, you stop reflecting the heat of your child's tantrum and start setting the temperature of your home. You will learn why your brain shuts down during a fight and how to turn it back on. How to find the space between something happening and your reaction to it. How to unpack that invisible backpack of old wounds so your kids don't have to carry them. How to fix the bond with your child after you've had a bad moment. How to build a home life that prevents the witching hour from happening in the first place. This isn't about being a perfect parent. There is no such thing. This is about being a connected parent. It's about making sure that even when things get hard, your children feel safe, loved, and respected rather than fearful. Why this works? You might have tried counting to 10 before. You might have tried taking a time out. If those things didn't work for you, there is a reason. Most advice tells you what to do, but it doesn't explain why your body is fighting you so hard. The tools in this book are based on real science and the wisdom of people who have studied the human spirit in the hardest conditions. We will look at how our brains are wired. We will look at how fear is learned and how it can be unlearned. We will use the teachings of Viktor Frankl, a man who survived the most terrible places on earth and discovered that our greatest power is the ability to choose our response to any situation. We will look at the gentle wisdom of Fred Rogers, who showed us that anything mentionable is manageable. This approach works because it doesn't ask you to just be better. It gives you a roadmap to heal. It treats the root of the anger, not just the symptoms of the screaming. Meet Sarah. Throughout this book, we are going to follow Sarah. Sarah is a freelance graphic designer. She works from her home office, which is really just a desk in the corner of the living room. She has 2 kids, Maya, who is 7 and very sensitive, and Leo, who is 4 and very loud. Sarah loves her kids more than life itself. But Sarah is also exhausted. She feels like she is on 24 hours a day. Her husband works long hours, so the witching hour, that time between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. when everyone is tired and hungry, falls entirely on her shoulders. Sarah is at her breaking point. She feels like she is losing the good parts of herself. She feels like her relationship with Maya is becoming a series of battles. She sees Maya pulling away, becoming quiet and cautious around her. It breaks Sarah's heart. Sarah's story is the story of so many parents today. She isn't a bad person. She is a person who has run out of gas and is trying to drive up a mountain. As we move through the chapters, we will watch Sarah try these tools. We will see her fail, and we will see her get back up. We will watch her slowly unpack her invisible backpack and learn how to be the parent she always wanted to be. The roadmap ahead. We are going to take this journey one step at a time. This isn't a race. It is a process of reclaiming your peace. We will start by looking at your buttons. We will learn why your children seem to know exactly how to trigger you. We'll find out that they aren't actually pushing buttons, they are revealing places where you are already hurting. Then, we will look at the lizard brain. We will talk about the biology of anger and why you can't use logic when you are already screaming. You will learn to recognize the early warning signs in your own body so you can stop the explosion before it starts. We will learn the art of the calm pause. You will get real practical tools used by people in high-stress jobs like Navy SEALs to keep their cool when things get chaotic. We will dive deep into the past. We will look at how you were parented and how those ghosts are showing up in your living room today. This is where we learn to forgive ourselves and our own parents, so we can stop the cycle of rage. We will talk about how to talk. We'll learn how to connect with our kids without using labels or evaluations that make them feel small. We will learn how to build routines that act like a safety net for your family's emotions. Finally, we will talk about repair. Because you will mess up again. Everyone does. The secret isn't being perfect. The secret is knowing how to fix the rupture and make the bond even stronger than it was before. By the end, we will look at how to maintain this peace for the long haul. We will look at how to protect your own energy so you have enough gas in the tank to be the parent your kids deserve. A judgment-free zone. Before we go any further, I want you to take a deep breath. If you are feeling guilt right now, let it go. If you are feeling shame, set it down. Shame is a heavy weight that makes it impossible to move forward. This book is a judgment-free zone. I know you love your kids. I know you are doing the best you can with the tools you currently have. The fact that you are reading this means you are a good parent. It means you care enough to change. It means you want something better for your children than what you are giving them right now. You are not a failure. You are a person who is learning a new language, the language of peace. Let's begin the work of becoming the steady anchor. Let's start by looking at why those buttons exist in the first place. Chapter 1. Why does my child know exactly which buttons to push? In the late 1890s, a scientist named Ivan Pavlov was working in a cold laboratory in Russia. He wasn't trying to study human emotions or the way parents react to their children. He was actually studying how dogs digest their food. He wanted to know how much saliva a dog's mouth made when it saw meat. Every day, a lab assistant would walk down the hallway to feed the dogs. Pavlov noticed something strange. The dogs began to drool before they even smelled the meat. They weren't reacting to the food yet. They were reacting to the sound of the assistant's boots clicking on the floor. To the dogs, that clicking sound meant food is coming. Pavlov decided to test this. He began ringing a bell or using a ticking metronome right before he gave the dogs their meal. At first, the dogs ignored the bell. It was just a noise. But after a few days, something changed. As soon as Pavlov rang the bell, the dogs' mouths began to water, even if no food was in the room. The dogs had learned a shortcut. Their brains had connected the sound of the bell to the feeling of hunger and the arrival of meat. This is called a conditioned response. The bell became a button that, when pushed, caused an automatic physical reaction. The dogs couldn't help it. Their bodies were acting on their own because of a connection their brains had made over and over again. This discovery changed how we understand the human brain. It turns out that humans have these bells too. We have sounds, smells, and sights that flip a switch in our minds before we even have a chance to think. For a parent at their breaking point, a child's whine or the sound of a glass breaking isn't just a noise. It is a bell that triggers a volcanic reaction. The Lego on the carpet. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Sarah sat at her kitchen table. She is a freelance graphic designer, and her laptop was open to a project that was already 2 days late. The clock read 5:15 p.m. This was the start of what she called the witching hour. Her 4-year-old Leo was zooming a plastic truck across the hardwood floor, making a high-pitched grinding sound that felt like a drill in Sarah's ears. Her 7-year-old Maya was sitting on the sofa, complaining that she couldn't find her favorite blue marker for her homework. "Maya, check the art bin," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I did. It's not there. Someone stole it," Maya wailed. Her voice hit a specific, sharp note. Sarah felt a sudden heat crawl up the back of her neck. Her heart began to drum against her ribs. She stood up to help Maya, but as she stepped away from the table, her bare heel landed squarely on a stray Lego. The pain was sharp, but the reaction was much bigger than a sore foot. In that second, Sarah didn't see a tired little girl or a messy living room. She saw a world that was out of control. She felt like she was being attacked. "Enough!" Sarah screamed. The sound was so loud it surprised her. "I am sick of the mess. I am sick of the whining. Everyone, go to your rooms right now." The house went silent. Leo dropped his truck. Maya's eyes filled with tears, and she shrank back into the sofa cushions. The bell had been rung, and Sarah had reacted exactly like Pavlov's dogs. She hadn't chosen to scream. It felt like the scream had simply pushed its way out of her. Later, after the kids were in bed, Sarah sat in the dark. The guilt was heavy, like a wet blanket. She wondered why she was so mean. She wondered why her children seemed to know exactly which buttons to push to make her lose her mind. She felt like a failure. What Sarah didn't realize yet was that she wasn't a bad person. She was a conditioned person. Her brain had spent years building a library of bells, and that afternoon, the Lego and the whining had rung them all at once. The invisible backpack. Every parent walks into their home carrying an invisible backpack. Inside this backpack are the stories of how we were treated when we were small. We don't usually look inside it, but it stays with us every day. When Sarah was a little girl, her own father had been very strict about wasted time and messes. If Sarah dropped a fork at dinner, her father would grow silent and cold. If she cried because she was frustrated, he would tell her to give him something to cry about. In Sarah's young brain, a mess didn't just mean a mess. It meant danger. It meant her father would pull away or get angry. She learned that to be safe, she had to be perfect and quiet. Now, 30 years later, Sarah is the parent. When Leo makes a mess or Maya whines, Sarah's brain reaches into that invisible backpack. It finds those old memories of her father's cold silence. Her brain thinks messes are dangerous. Whining is a threat. Her children aren't actually pushing buttons that they created. They are bumping into the buttons that were installed in Sarah's brain decades ago. These are called unhealed wounds. When a child pushes a button, they are usually just being a child. They are testing boundaries, expressing a need, or simply being messy because their own brains aren't fully grown yet. But for a parent with an invisible backpack, that behavior feels like a personal attack. If you grew up in a house where you weren't allowed to be loud, your child's laughter might actually feel irritating. If you were punished for being disrespectful whenever you had an opinion, your child saying no might make you feel a sudden surge of rage. The first step to stopping the yelling isn't to change the child. It is to look inside the backpack. It is to realize that the bell is ringing, but there is no meat coming. The danger isn't real. The space between. Years after Pavlov's dogs, a man named Viktor Frankl was living through one of the most terrible times in history. He was a psychiatrist who was held in a concentration camp during World War II. He lost almost everything: his home, his family, and his freedom. In a place where he had no control over his life, Frankl noticed something incredible. He saw that even when people were treated cruelly, some of them chose to be kind. They would give away their last piece of bread to someone else. Frankl realized that there is a tiny moment between what happens to us and how we react. He said that in that small space, we have the power to choose. For a parent, the stimulus is the spilled milk, the backtalk, or the lost shoe. The response is the yelling or the deep breath. Most of the time, the space between the two feels like it doesn't exist. We go from stimulus to response in a split second. It feels like a straight line. Viktor Frankl's work teaches us that we can stretch that space. We can make it wider. Imagine a rubber band. When your child screams, the rubber band is pulled tight. If you react instantly, the rubber band snaps. But if you can pause for even 1 second, you are stretching that rubber band without breaking it. In that 1 second of space, you can remember that you are the adult and they are the child. You can remember that you are a thermostat, not a thermometer. A thermometer simply reacts to the room. If the room is hot, the thermometer shows a high temperature. If the room is cold, the thermometer drops. Most parents act like thermometers. If the kids are screaming hot, the parent screams hot. A thermostat is different. A thermostat sets the temperature. If the room gets too cold, the thermostat turns on the heat to bring it back to a comfortable level. If the room gets too hot, the thermostat brings it down. When Sarah screamed at Leo and Maya, she was being a thermometer. She was reflecting their chaos. To become a steady anchor, Sarah needed to learn how to find the space Frankl talked about, so she could act like a thermostat instead. Mapping the minefield. Sarah decided to try an experiment. For 1 week, she kept a small notebook in her kitchen drawer. She called it her trigger log. She didn't try to stop yelling yet. She just wanted to see when the bells were ringing. Every time she felt that heat in her neck or the urge to scream, she wrote down 3 things. What time is it? What just happened? What does this remind me of from my own childhood? By Wednesday, she saw a pattern. Almost all of her entries happened between 5 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. This was when she was tired, hungry, and worried about her work deadlines. On Thursday, Maya spilled a bowl of cereal. Sarah felt the rage bubbling up. She opened her notebook. What happened? Spilled milk. What does this remind me of? My dad calling me clumsy and stupid when I broke a plate at age 6. As Sarah wrote those words, the rage started to leak out of her. She realized she wasn't actually mad at Maya. She was mad at the memory of her father. She was sad for the little girl she used to be, who wasn't allowed to make mistakes. Maya looked up at her, waiting for the explosion. Her little shoulders were hunched up near her ears. It's okay, Maya, Sarah said. Her voice was shaky, but she wasn't yelling. It's just milk. Let's get a towel. In that moment, Sarah had found the space. She had cut the wire to one of her buttons. She had looked into her invisible backpack and decided that the ghost of her father didn't get to run her kitchen anymore. The science of safety. Why does it feel so hard to stay calm? Why does our brain treat a spilled drink like a life or death emergency? Our brains have a very old part called the amygdala. This part of the brain has one job: to keep us alive. Thousands of years ago, if a tiger jumped out of the bushes, the amygdala would instantly shut down the thinking part of the brain and send all the body's energy to the muscles so we could fight or run away. This is called the fight or flight response. The problem is that the amygdala is not very smart. It cannot tell the difference between a tiger and a defiant toddler. When your child says no or rolls their eyes, your amygdala thinks, I am under attack. It floods your body with chemicals that make you feel like you need to fight. This is why your face gets red. This is why your muscles get tight. This is why you say things you regret. Your thinking brain has been turned off to make room for your survival brain. When you yell, you are essentially trying to scare away the tiger. But your child isn't a tiger. Your child is a person who is looking to you to see if they are safe. If you react with rage, your child's own amygdala flips on. Now you have 2 people in the room who are both in survival mode. No one can learn. No one can listen. The bond between you begins to fray. Understanding this science takes the shame away. You aren't crazy or evil. You have a brain that is trying to protect you, but it is using an old map. By learning to identify your triggers, you are teaching your amygdala that you are safe. You are telling your brain, thank you for trying to protect me, but I can handle this spilled milk without fighting a tiger. The vision of the steady anchor. Imagine a different kind of evening. It is 5:30 p.m. The house is noisy. There are crumbs on the floor and a stack of mail on the counter. You feel the familiar tug of irritation. You hear the bell start to ring. But instead of the automatic drool of rage, you feel a small pause. You recognize the feeling. Oh, there is that heat in my chest, you think. That's because I'm tired, and this reminds me of how my mom used to yell when the house was messy. Because you see the button, you don't have to push it. You take a breath. You look at your child. You see a kid who is having a hard time, not a kid who is giving you a hard time. You speak firmly but calmly. You set a boundary without breaking a heart. The witching hour doesn't disappear. Kids will still be kids. They will still lose their shoes, forget their homework, and argue about who got more juice. But you are no longer a thermometer. You are the thermostat. When you change, the whole house changes. When you stop reacting to every bell, your children stop living in fear of the next explosion. They begin to feel safe enough to tell you the truth, to make mistakes, and to grow. You are not just stopping the yelling. You are breaking a chain that might have been in your family for hundreds of years. You are taking the heavy stones out of your invisible backpack so that your children don't have to carry them when they grow up. This journey isn't about being perfect. It's about being aware. It's about moving from a conditioned response to an intentional connection. The buttons are there, but they don't have to control you. You are the one with the bell now, and you get to decide when and if it rings. Chapter 2: The Lizard Brain: Why Logic Fails in the Heat of the Moment. In the autumn of 1848, a young man named Phineas Gage was simply trying to do his job. He was 25 years old, well-liked by his friends, and known by his bosses as the most capable foreman on the railroad crew. He was smart, quiet, and possessed a well-balanced mind. Phineas wasn't looking to change the world or become a name in a medical textbook. He just wanted to help lay the tracks for the Rutland and Burlington Railroad in Vermont. The work was dangerous and required a steady hand. Phineas was responsible for blasting through rock. This involved drilling a deep hole, filling it with gunpowder, adding a fuse, and then packing it down with a heavy iron rod. On a warm September afternoon, something went wrong. Perhaps he was distracted by a coworker, or perhaps the timing was just off. As Phineas used his 13-pound iron rod to pack the powder, a spark flew. The powder exploded with a roar. The iron rod, 3 feet long and over an inch thick, became a missile. It flew upward, entering Phineas's left cheek, passing through the front of his brain, and exiting the top of his skull. The rod landed 30 yards away, covered in blood and brain matter. Phineas was knocked backward, but to the shock of everyone watching, he didn't die. Within minutes, he was sitting up and talking. He even walked to a cart so he could be taken to see a doctor. When the doctor arrived, Phineas looked at him and said, "Doctor, here is business enough for you." Physically, Phineas healed. He could walk, talk, and remember his past. But the man who returned to work was not the man his friends knew. The well-balanced Phineas was gone. In his place was someone fitful, irreverent, and prone to fits of wild temper. He would scream and swear at people for no reason. He couldn't stick to a plan. His bosses, who once praised his leadership, had to fire him because his personality had shifted so violently. Phineas Gage never asked to be a pioneer of brain science. He was a man who lost the brakes of his mind. His story taught the world that a specific part of the brain, the part right behind your forehead, is what allows us to be kind, patient, and logical. Without it, we are at the mercy of our most basic angry instincts. The myth of the bad parent. Most parents believe a very common myth. We think that when we scream at our kids over a spilled glass of juice or a messy bedroom, it is because we are bad people. We believe we lack character, or that we simply aren't trying hard enough to be patient. We look at other parents who seem calm and think they must have a special kind of goodness that we missed out on. This is the myth of the character flaw. It tells us that our anger is a choice we are making because we are failing as human beings. The truth is much more like the story of Phineas Gage. When you are at your breaking point, you haven't lost your character. You have lost access to the part of your brain that handles logic. In that moment, your brakes have been cut. We often think we can talk ourselves out of rage while it is happening. We tell ourselves, "Stop it. You love your kids. Don't be that person." But if the explosion has already started, those words are like whispering to a hurricane. They don't work because the logical brain, the one that understands words and consequences, has been pushed out of the driver's seat. People believe the myth of willpower because it gives them a sense of control. If anger is just a choice, then we should be able to choose differently. But when we fail to choose calm, we end up drowning in shame. We need to stop looking at our outbursts as a sign of a bad heart, and start looking at them as a sign of a hijacked brain. Meet your lizard brain. Inside your head, there is a constant battle for control. You don't just have one mind. You have several layers of brain that evolved over millions of years. The oldest part of your brain sits at the very base, near your neck. This is often called the lizard brain or the survival brain. Its only job is to keep you alive. It doesn't care about your child's feelings. It doesn't care about the witching hour, and it certainly doesn't care about being a gentle parent. It only cares about threats.